Hey, everybody, welcome back to the podcast. You're listening to the longest running superhero role playing game on Earth. As always, I'm your host, Chris Kent, and normally I refer to myself as the GM. But the game master for this adventure was Howard Warnes, all the way back in 1996. Anyways, before we get into the stuff that Howard ran, smash that like button, make sure you're subscribed, ring the bell for notifications, and as always, be sure to leave us a comment as that really helps out with the YouTube algorithm. With all that said, let's dive into the adventure. So, like I say, Howard ran this one, and Howard has a reputation in our circle of friends for being equal parts crazy and genius. Back around 96, his car broke down, and to make a long story short, every single night I would drive him home from work and he would pay me in the form of running a game for me. So while most of the games that I ran in 96 were set in the modern day, the stuff Howard ran was a prequel to my game. And every night after work, he'd run another episode in that series. In the 1980s, Wayne Birch, who owned the comic shop where me and Howard hung out, was the game master. And Wayne introduced Über Frau as a version of Supergirl who had been raised by the evil dictator of Germany. Kara Zor-El, by the way, is probably my favorite comic book character of all time. So my character that I was playing, Superman Red, thought that any version of Kara must have some good in her, even if this particular version seemed to be evil at surface level. So throughout this campaign, which took about 250 adventures to tell, Superman Red's goal was to reform Uberfrau and help Kara become a hero. In my mind, I was going to succeed, and in the modern day, she was going to be a more traditional Supergirl. I mention all of this as a sort of prologue, setting things up for what comes next. So, if that was the prologue, the main plot then would be that Uberfrau, at the end of the war, does in fact decide to side with the Allied forces. It turns out that the Germans kept her from seeing a lot of the worst parts of what they were doing. Sometimes buildings were painted with lead paint so she couldn't see through them. Certain areas were a no-fly zone for Kara, that sort of thing. So once her eyes were finally opened to the atrocities that were taking place, she quietly started to free people from internment facilities. She'd see where certain heroes were hiding, but tell her superiors she couldn't find them or that they got away, that sort of thing. So after her getting away with this for a while, Blitzkrieg, who was a German soldier who'd copied the powers of Shazam, found out what Kara was doing and attacked her. Superman Red shows up a little too late, and sadly, Kara is breathing her last. She gave him a kiss on the cheek and apologized for everything she'd ever done wrong, and then she passed away. For those of us playing the DC Heroes RPG in 96, we were all pretty shocked by this. And of course, now Superman Red was out for blood, and he'd earned a ton of hero points that he hadn't spent on anything. So he tracks down Blitzkrieg and starts laying into him. And it played out like a scene from one of the Rocky movies. These two were punching each other through buildings, hitting each other with tanks, all sorts of stuff. But one advantage that Superman Red had was because his powers came from Kryptonite, he lacked the vulnerability to magic that Uberfrau and Superman have. Even the evil male clones that the Germans made using Uberfrau's DNA had that vulnerability to magic. So Blitzkrieg's gotten a pretty big head. Superman Red sits on his chest, gets that big head in his hands, and slowly crushed it. Which brings us to the epilogue, which is that Superman Red gets surprise attacked by Ubermensch, one of those evil male clones I was talking about. Ubermensch's plan is to finish off Superman Red while he's low on hit points from his fight with Blitzkrieg. But what he overlooked is the split power. As we've said so often on this channel, Superman Red was called Dagda in ancient Ireland and he became 12 Dagdas, which then became 144 Dagdas, so on and so forth. And the way that the split power works is they all share one hive mind, kind of like the Borg. So when you attack one of them, the rest of them all know it. So when Superman Red gets close to dying, his other selves, who are going by names like Oberon, Beowulf, and King Arthur, they all become aware of this and they come to help him. It's King Arthur who runs Ubermensch through with Excalibur, a magic item, taking advantage of the villain's vulnerability to magic. So Ubermensch dies too. The American Bear, who was another one of these Dagda guys, was turned into a werebear by Circe in Greece. We built him using the rules from a 90s RPG called Werewolf the Apocalypse. And to make a long story short, one of the things that the were creatures could do in that game system was called Mother's Touch, which in DC Heroes would be regeneration usable on others. So the American Bear heals what's wrong with Superman Red. And with guys like Blitzkrieg and Ubermensch out of the picture, the Axis powers are running out of living weapons in their arsenal. So the war is going to be over very soon. And that's about it for this episode. I want to give a special shout out to Wayne Birch for coming up with Über Frau all the way back in the 80s. Wayne was a great GM, and I miss playing with him, and I miss hanging out at his store. I should also credit Howard Warrens for running this. I think Howard is an incredibly good GM, and I wish that we could have somehow recorded those game sessions and played them back for you guys now. His campaign could be a channel all of its own. And I really, really enjoyed playing in Howard's games. Hopefully you enjoyed hearing about it a little bit today. If so, as always, it would mean a lot to us if you took a second out of your schedule to hit the like button, make sure you're subscribed, ring the bell for notifications, and leave us a comment, because it really does help us out with the algorithm and it helps more eyes see what we do. So all that said, from all of us here at the longest running superhero RPG on Earth, we hope that you guys have a great week, and we will see you in the next adventure. Bye.